Welcome to Bitter Reality Brewing. It's the top 10 tips, tricks, recommendations, hacks, whatever you want to call them. Don't forget, like, subscribe, keep sharing, definitely appreciate it. Also, if you haven't seen, we're running a poll right now. We want to know how many people like beer. Really simple, all you gotta do is hit the subscribe button, make it go away so it doesn't look red. If it's not red, we know you like beer. Also, if you love beer, hit the like, make sure the subscribe is not red anymore. Awesome. So without further ado, and yeah, I'm always sharing, I think I showed you the Swamp Head Stump Knocker, which was their pale ale, aka a session IPA, but a pale ale, really awesome. A little heavier on the heavier side. This is called Big Nose Indian Pale Ale, and it looks like a stomp or swamp wood touching his nose, although I thought he was picking his nose the first few times I saw it. And it's an Indian Pale Ale coming in around 7.3%. And I always say the IPAs at around 7%, that's the magic number. It's where you can get all the great flavors and aromas. There you go. So we're gonna go right into it. Number one, Saran Wrap. And I know you're going, Saran Wrap? Is he kidding? What's he talking about? Whenever you're storing your carboys in a shed, a garage, or anywhere long-term, and yes, if you live in Australia, we got some people in Australia, I know, and everybody in the rest of the world knows you all have all kinds of crazy critters that will just kill you. So yeah, I don't want to have to deal with a big old crazy spider. And yeah, I'm in Florida, we get plenty of spiders, just most of them won't kill us. Right there, you take the Saran Wrap, put it over it, twist it in opposite directions, instant seal. I can put this away, I don't have to worry about any kind of critters crawling in my carboy. You can do it with bottles too. If you're going to store bottles long term, go for it. A little bit of Saran Wrap, but honestly, with that, that's a lot of bottles. I'm just going to store them, rewash them, re-sterilize or sanitize them, whatever you want to call it. And if I got something in there, it's going in the recycle. I'm not going to deal with that. Just saying. It's too many things. My carboys, I used to store them out in our shed. We're getting ready to turn that into a tiny home, hopefully. So yeah, they had to come out. I had to seal them, all the little 1 gallons, 5 gallons, everything. I had to 6 gallons, all of them. They even got some 3 gallons over there, but they already got the Saran Wrap on them. Number 2, and after 6 years of brewing, I've never had this problem. But my last 4 brews, I have had like foam central. I'm talking foam central, lots of foam. My only human guess is that I'm turning the grains faster and all the grains are super fresh. So maybe, but I mean, I used to go on literally like an entire week-long brew session where all I did was brew 2, 3, 4 beers a day. Yeah, some were 1 gallons, but still, I brewed a lot of beer. But Defoamer. Number 2 is Defoamer. This is 5-star, same people make Star Sand, PBW, and all those. This is Defoamer 105. I got it from my local homebrew shop, recommended by my local homebrew shop. I will leave links, sadly, not to my local homebrew shop. They don't have a website for that, but so that you can get it, maybe Amazon, but definitely one of the homebrew shops online. If you've seen any of the brews I've been doing and the foam is just non-stop out of control, I put 1 tiny drip of this stuff in there and instantly, no more foam problem. I get a little bit of foam, but no more foam problem. This stuff is amazing. It saves me a headache. I can run in, grab my hops, get other things done, take care of the brew day without having to sit and stir for 90 minutes. So number 3, and number 3 kind of leads us into the whole theme of this top 10. We're going to talk about, yeah, I know you're looking at me like I'm crazy, vegetables and coffee. I know you get coffee, but vegetables. So number 3 is vegetables in your beer. I'll let you absorb that for a moment. Yes, you can add vegetables in many ways. Pumpkin, oh my God, you're going, oh, duh. Beets, I'm dying to do a thing with beets. I really am dying to do a thing with beets. A vegetable I'm just starting to get more and more exposure to, and I had some, at a brewery I went and I had these beets that were cooked with a little bit of honey and thyme, and it was just amazing. Had it with a big giant Reuben, but hey, that was, the way it was. Corn, potatoes, hot peppers, we all know hot peppers, cucumbers, and even winter squash. There's so many things you can add to beer. It is really up to your imagination and of course, what you want to drink. I think of beer, like I said, for the coloring and maybe a little bit of the flavoring, from the beets to the winter squashes. I love, acorn's really good, but dumpling squash, oh my God, that would make an amazing cream ale. So number 3 is vegetables in your beer. Number 4, using veggies. How do you use them? First, veggies, of course, keep them clean. If you're adding them to the boil, consider zesting veggies, like a cucumber. Cucumber, there's very little flavor in a cucumber, and I know there is flavor, but very little flavor that can be transferred inside the cucumber. The majority of the flavor comes from the zest, and that goes with a lot of vegetables. But you also have to keep in mind that you need to make sure that they aren't wax coated. Preferably they're organic, so you're not just putting a lot of pesticides in your beer. Those are things to consider. There's a lot of squashes. I mean, if you take the squash and you taste the inside and you roast the outside and taste that a little bit, you might find that some of the squashes actually transfer more flavor from that of the zest than they would from that of the meat of the product, should we say, or meat of the potato, however you want to say it. I'm not saying potato, but hey. Number 5, getting into the coffee, fat or oil, which is still fat, from coffee. Something to be aware of. Yeah, I know people are like, I didn't know there was fat in coffee. Yeah, there is. Keep in mind, when you're adding coffee beans in any form to beer, if they're really shiny, it's usually a sign that they're really fresh, and that shininess is actually oil. It's the oils from the roasting of the beans, the oils seeping out of the actual bean. So you need to understand that that can impact your overall head retention of your beer. It's not a big deal. If you're adding it to stouts and porters, it's kind of an accepted, it is what it is, but just something to be aware of, that if you're using coffee beans, there is fat. Now keep in mind, if they're not shiny, they're probably old, so it's kind of a trade-off, but something to be aware of. Number 6, don't worry about coffee acidity. I saw this on Reddit just literally like 2 days ago. Somebody was all concerned about how acidic their beer was going to be because they were going to add coffee. I'm sorry, coffee is acidic, but it's a lot less acidic compared to beer, unless you're going totally nuts and adding some beer to your coffee, you know what I mean? You really got to go crazy to make any real impact to the finished product. It may impact it at a point something, but it's going to be minor, very minor. Don't worry about the acidity in the coffee. Number 7, adding coffee after fermentation. Yes, adding coffee after fermentation. That's something I've done several times. Coffee can be added after the fermentation is complete. A few things you need to be aware of course. One, you can add it like as an espresso or coffee itself, fresh brewed, or even, I know, a lot of these Cascade flavorings, but you could add a coffee flavoring. And I don't think Cascade makes the coffee flavoring, but you can add a coffee flavoring. Don't use one with glycol. It's so gross, just nasty. But yes, you can add flavorings after the fact. Keep in mind too, when you're adding after fermentation, you need to make sure it's either been sterilized, pasteurized, cooked, whatever. You got that chance of an infection, so you got to make sure you're very, very careful. And the alcohol will help, but it won't prevent all infections. It just won't. Number 8, coffee. Ready for this? Number 8, coffee without adding coffee. Huh? Yeah, adding coffee without adding coffee. To me, it makes perfect sense since I just brewed an Irish extra stout. Keep in mind, there are a lot of dark roasted malts that will give you big coffee flavors without adding coffee, such as roasted barley is probably the epitome of coffee. I mean, that is the prime example of a fresh roasted coffee. There's a lot of chocolate and even some of the mild chocolates out there that will give you a subtle hint of coffee. And you got to keep that in mind. I hear people all the time, hey, how do I add coffee? How do I add coffee? Well, wait a minute. How much coffee flavor do you really want? You might already have it in there, or you might be able to add it if you're still, building the recipe and haven't brewed it yet. So keep in mind, you can add coffee without adding coffee. Number 9, coffee grounds. Something you got to be aware of. And coffee grounds go with just crushing the fresh coffee if you want. I don't care. But if you're adding fresh coffee grounds, coffee to the mash, the boil, the fermenter, consider the grind, okay? And the reason I say this, and I've been listening to professional brewers, they usually like a coarser grind. Now they understand that the coarser grind will have less impact on flavor from the coffee, but in comparison to finer grind coffee that will give you a great amount of coffee flavor very quickly, it can be a real pain in the backside to get out of your wort, your beer, whatever you want to call it. But basically, the larger grind will fall out of suspension. It'll be easier to filter out, less chance it's going to end up in your finished product. If you do a really fine grind, yeah, that could end up in, even if you're doing bottling, that can get through a lot of things. So it's something to be very, very aware of, that the finer the grind, the more likely you're going to have to make sure you get it out of suspension. The coarser the grind, less issues you're going to have, but it's going to take a little longer. And I've been listening to some of these breweries, and they will literally only go 12 to 48 hours. Some only go 24 hours max. And that's the same thing with the cocoa nibs. They just try to keep the minimal contact. Cocoa nibs, actually, they mentioned something, and I know it should be a bonus tip, that once you get past 24 or 36 hours, you start getting more astringency out of those cocoa nibs. So coffee, I could see a little bit of the same being impacted. So it's something to be aware of. Number 10, and this is so simple, and I even have a can in my fridge of Allagash White, which I think I mentioned in a previous tip, that Dogfish Head uses it sometimes for tasting by doing additions to a Allagash White to see what impact the flavorings will have on a beer that they're considering making. So they can try to see just how much of that they may have to add to a glass, and then they turn around and of course magnify that and add it to a much larger test bed or the final product. But pre-testing your coffee and beer, consider testing the coffee you're considering in a home brew or by adding a small amount to a comparable commercial brew. So let's say you're brewing a pale ale and you want it to be a coffee pale ale. I know I'm not a big fan of that. I've had a few, but recently too. But go buy a pale ale if you don't have one on your tap. Add a very small percentage of what you think you'll use in your final product to do your entire 5, 10, whatever gallons of beer, and try it. Another trick that I saw, which was kind of cool, and actually I have right here, you can, or up here, you can cap your own bottles. Take a bottle of beer, commercial, especially a bottle, can's a little harder. Put that amount of coffee in there, close it up, put a new cap on, purge it if you have to, whatever. Hopefully you're not doing too much craziness. Put it back in your fridge, let it sit there for whatever, 12 hours, 24 hours, a day, 8 hours, whatever it may be that you're thinking that it's going to impart that amount of flavor that you're looking for. Then when you're ready, pop it open and test it. And you can do multiple tests. You can do a bunch of them. You can put different percentages of coffee in, or you can let them sit for different amounts of time. Think about it. A 6-pack of beer, what's that going to cost you? $10, maybe $12 for good quality beer? Versus doing a 5-gallon batch? I mean, my time is valuable, and even when I'm doing stuff for fun, I consider my time very valuable, and I would rather do it right the first time than have to brew another batch, another batch, another batch, another batch. That gets old quick. So just test, and test on a very small point, and then multiply it out and see how it goes. You're probably going to land a little closer to where you might be, and I will tell you flat out, and brewers will tell you this, doing a small batch versus a big batch, things kind of diminish returns, or sometimes you get a little more, a little less, usually less, but something to be aware of. But that's it. That's the top 10 tips, tricks, recommendations for week 19. Thank you again for joining us here at Bitter Reality Brewing. Don't forget, like, subscribe, keep sharing. And if that thing's red, I don't know you like beer at all. Come on, even if you love food, hit the red button. Thank you again. Have a great evening.